January 11, 1944, 11:14 in the morning, 24,000 feet above Oschersleben, Germany. Major Dalton J. Merritt circled his P-51B Mustang in the frozen sky, watching 30 German fighters dive towards 60 unprotected bombers 4 miles below. The 33-year-old pilot had flown 86 combat missions in China with the Flying Tigers. But today marked only his 37th day flying the controversial new fighter that military brass called suicidal for long-range escort. His radio crackled. Static. White noise. Then silence. His four-man flight had scattered, chasing separate attacks across the winter sky. He was alone. Below him, formations of Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf F-190s closed on the four first bomb group at 23,000 feet. 60 B-17 flying fortresses carrying 600 American airmen. Unprotected. Vulnerable. 300 miles deep into the Third Reich. Merritt's gloved hand rested on the throttle. His fuel gauge read 290 gallons, enough to escort the bombers for the next 37 minutes until they reached friendly airspace, or enough to turn west and make it home to England with fuel to spare. Not enough for both. The German interceptors had launched from 3 airfields around Brunswick. They'd been tracking the bomber stream for 18 minutes, climbing positioning, waiting for the American fighter escort to turn back at the German border. The fighters had turned back, all except one. Merritt watched the lead German fighters open fire at 800 yards. A B-17 named Little Chum took hits in both wings. Another bomber, Hell's Angels, lost an engine. Black smoke poured from its number 3 nacelle. The formation tightened but couldn't evade. Without fighter escorts, 60 bombers carrying 600 airmen would face the full weight of German interceptors for the next 37 minutes until they reached friendly airspace. Merritt pushed the throttle forward. He dove. They called this fighter suicidal. Watch what one suicidal pilot can do in 37 minutes. 24 hours earlier, 10 o'clock at night, RAF boxed at England. Merritt sat alone in his tent studying the wall beside his cot. 86 tally marks, 86 combat missions flown with the American Volunteer Group in Burma and China. 86 times he'd strapped into a P-40 Warhawk and fought Japanese Zeros over the Himalayas. Tonight would be Mission 87. A letter rested on his footlocker. Open, read a dozen times. The handwriting belonged to his wife, Eleanor. The girls ask when Daddy's coming home. I tell them soon. Please make it true. 3 photographs were pinned above his bed. 2 daughters, ages 7 and 5. Blonde hair like their mother. Smiling at a camera somewhere in Kansas where winter snow didn't fall at minus 42 degrees and you couldn't see your breath inside heated buildings. Merritt had volunteered for the Flying Tigers in 1941 before Pearl Harbor, when America wasn't officially at war. He'd fought in China for 2 years, 86 missions. Then the Army Air Forces had recalled him, assigned him to the newly formed 354th Fighter Group, the Pioneer Mustangs, first unit to fly the P-51B into combat over Germany. He'd been flying the Mustang for exactly 37 days. The tent flap opened. Cold air rushed in. Captain Thaddeus Kincaid stepped inside, exhaling frost. 28 years old, 12, confirmed kills flight leader. They called him Razor. Briefings at 0600, Kincaid said. Deep penetration. Oschersleben. How deep? 300 miles. Focke-Wulf factory. Heavy opposition expected. Merritt nodded, said nothing. Kincaid looked at the 86 tally marks. You ever lose a bomber? In China, we didn't escort bombers. We hunted. Different war over here, Kincaid said. Different job. Same sky. Kincaid left. The tent flap closed. Merritt stared at the photographs above his bed. Eleanor, 2 daughters, waiting in Kansas. He'd made a promise before he left. Come home. Don't be a hero. Come home. Tomorrow he'd fly Mission 87 in an airplane that half the Air Force thought would get him killed. The North American P-51B Mustang. Military commanders called it a gamble. A beautiful, deadly, unproven gamble. The airplane had entered combat only 5 weeks earlier, in December 1943. Before that, it existed only in engineering drawings and wind tunnel tests. A fighter built around a British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine mated to an American airframe designed for speed. The result was an airplane that could fly farther and faster than anything else in the sky. In theory. Theory and combat were different animals. The Merlin engine was unproven at minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Unproven at 24,000 feet and above. Unknown how it would perform in sustained combat over Germany, where Luftwaffe fighters waited in strength and winter cold turned oil to sludge. The P-51B's combat range was theoretical. 1,650 miles on paper. Never tested this deep into enemy territory. Never pushed to the limits where one mechanical failure, one hit from enemy fire, one miscalculation of fuel consumption meant a dead engine 300 miles from home. Its reliability was a question mark written in ice and fire. And the 354th Fighter Group was the test case. The Pioneer Mustangs, first to find out if the airplane would save the bomber war or kill the pilots who flew it. The bomber war was dying, August through October 1943. 3 missions, 180 B-17s shot down, 1,800 airmen lost. Schweinfurt, Regensburg, towns in Germany that meant nothing to most Americans but everything to the men who flew bombers. 60 B-17s lost at Schweinfurt. 600 airmen, pilots, co-pilots, navigators, bombardiers, gunners. Young men who climbed into 4-engine bombers and flew into walls of flak and swarms of German fighters. 60 more lost at Regensburg. Another 600 airmen gone. Then came Black Thursday, October 14, 1943. 60 B-17s shot down in a single day. 600 airmen killed, wounded, or captured. The worst day in the history of American strategic bombing. The numbers didn't lie. The math was brutal and simple. At that rate of loss, the 8th Air Force would run out of crews before it ran out of targets. The problem was range. American fighters couldn't escort the bombers deep into Germany. The P-47 Thunderbolt could reach the German border, then had to turn back. The P-38 Lightning struggled at high-altitude engines failing in the cold. Beyond the German border, the bombers flew alone, and the Luftwaffe waited. German fighters would shadow the bomber formations, waiting for the American escorts to turn back. Then they'd attack. Methodical, ruthless, efficient. 60 bombers, 600 airmen. Every mission. The 8th Air Force had nearly suspended daylight bombing entirely. Then came December 5th. 36 P-51B Mustangs from the 354th Fighter Group flew the first long-range escort mission. Destination Paris, 250 miles into occupied France, deeper than any American fighter had gone before. The mission succeeded. All bombers returned. All fighters returned. But the brass didn't trust it. Range was theoretical. Engine reliability was unknown. Combat performance was unproven. One mission to Paris didn't prove the Mustang could fight and win 300 miles deep into Germany, where the Luftwaffe's best pilots waited with fighters that had ruled the European sky for 4 years. January 11th would be the test. Oschersleben, 300 miles into the Reich, a Focke-Wulf factory building the FW-190 fighters that were killing American bombers. 60 B-17s would attack the factory. 36 P-51Bs would escort them. If the Mustangs failed, 60 bombers would burn. 600 airmen would die. And the daylight bombing campaign would end. If the Mustangs succeeded, they'd prove that American fighters could go anywhere German fighters could go. Fight anywhere. Win anywhere. Mission 87. Merritt lay on his cot and stared at the canvas ceiling. Outside, winter wind howled across the English airfield. Somewhere in the darkness, ground crews were fueling and arming 36 P-51Bs, 650 caliber machine guns per airplane, 412 rounds per gun, 2,472 rounds total. Enough to fight. Maybe enough to win. If the guns didn't freeze. If the engine didn't quit. If the pilot didn't make a mistake. He thought about Burma, 1942, 86 missions ago. He thought about the missions where everything went right and the missions where everything went wrong, and the fine line between the two that separated living pilots from dead ones. He thought about Eleanor's letter. The girls ask when Daddy's coming home. He closed his eyes, tried to sleep, failed. Mission 87 would start in 8 hours, 6:30 in the morning, January 11th. The briefing room was packed. 72 pilots from 2 squadrons, 36 P-51Bs. Maps covered the wall behind the briefing officer. Major Dalton Merritt sat in the 3rd row. Captain Kincaid sat beside him. Behind them, Lieutenant Everett Hayes, 23 years old, first deep penetration mission, hands shaking just enough to notice. The briefing officer pulled back the curtain covering the mission map. A red line stretched from RAF Boxted across the English Channel, across the Netherlands, deep into Germany. The line ended at a town called Oschersleben, 300 miles. Gentlemen, the briefing officer said, today's target is the Focke-Wulf aircraft factory at Oschersleben. 60 B-17s from the 401st Bomb Group will attack the factory. Your job is to get them there and back. He pointed to the map. 3 red circles marked German airfields near Brunswick. Intelligence estimates 80+ enemy fighters operating from these bases. Expect heavy opposition. The Luftwaffe knows we're coming. 80 fighters, more than 2-to-1 odds. The briefing officer continued. You'll escort to target, cover the bomb run, and escort withdrawal to the German border. P-47 Thunderbolts will meet you here. He pointed to a spot on the map, and escort the bombers the rest of the way home. What about fuel? Someone asked. You'll drop external tanks over the Netherlands. Internal fuel gives you approximately 90 minutes of combat time. Use it wisely. 90 minutes, 300 miles deep, 37 minutes until relief. The math was tight. No room for error. No fuel for extended combat. Enough to escort. Not enough to chase, not enough to hunt. The briefing officer looked at the assembled pilots. Young men, average age 24. Some had 10 missions, some had 50. None had flown this deep. This is what the Mustang was built for, he said. This is why you're here. Prove it works. He paused. Wheels up at 09:15. Good luck. Merritt walked to his airplane in the pre-dawn dark. Frost covered the wings. Ground crews worked under portable lights, loading ammunition belts, checking fuel tanks, inspecting control surfaces. P-51B, Mustang serial number 436315. Someone had painted a name on the nose, Dakota. His crew chief, Technical Sergeant Henry Kowalski, stood beside the wing. 42 years old, Polish immigrant, mechanic before the war, best crew chief in the squadron. She's ready, Major, Kowalski said. 6 guns, full ammo, 290 gallons internal, plus drop tanks. I checked the Merlin 3 times. Run smooth. Merritt nodded, ran his hand along the fuselage. Cold aluminum, rivets, and sheet metal. An airplane built in California, powered by an engine built in Britain, flown by a pilot from Kansas into a sky over Germany, where young men killed each other at 400 miles per hour. How many missions on this bird? Merritt asked. 15. No mechanical failures. She's solid. 15 missions. Dakota had flown 15 times and come home 15 times. 90 minutes per mission average. 22.5 hours of combat. The airplane was barely broken in. Merritt climbed onto the wing, settled into the cockpit. The seat fit like it was built for him, because after 37 days of flying this airplane, it almost was. 6 gun switches, gun sight, throttle, mixture, prop pitch, fuel selector, oxygen regulator, radio, instruments that would keep him alive or get him killed depending on how well he used them. Kowalski climbed onto the wing beside the cockpit. You flew 86 missions in China, right? Right. You ever get scared? Merritt looked at him. Every single time. But you kept flying. Fear doesn't ground you, Merritt said. It keeps you sharp. The pilots who aren't scared are the ones who don't come back. Kowalski nodded. Climb down. Step back. All across the airfield, P-51 engines coughed to life. Merlin 12-cylinder V engines. 1,500 horsepower each. 36 engines. 54,000 horsepower waking up in the English winter. Merritt flipped switches. Fuel pump. Magnetos. Starter. The Merlin turned over, coughed, caught, settled into a smooth rumble that shook the airframe. He checked his watch. 0900, 15 minutes to wheels up. Around him, the other pilots were running through pre-flight checks. Captain Kincaid in the lead ship. Lieutenant Hayes in his wing position, hands still shaking. Lieutenant Garrett Lowell, the steady one, the pilot who never got excited and never made mistakes. 4-ship flight. Call signs Hawk 1 through Hawk 4. Merritt was Hawk 2. 0910. 5 minutes. The tower radio crackled. All Hawk flights, this is Boxted Tower. Winds 270 at 15. Altimeter 3012. You are cleared for departure. Kincaid's voice came through the headset. Hawk flight check-in. Hawk 2. Hawk 3. Hawk 4. Copy all. Follow me up. Kincaid's P-51 rolled forward. The rest of the flight followed. One by one, 36 Mustangs taxied to the runway. Single file. Wingtips nearly touching in the dark. 0915. Kincaid's engine roared. His Mustang accelerated down the runway. 3 seconds. 5 seconds. 7 seconds. Nose wheel lifted. Main gear lifted. Airborne. Merritt counted to 10. Pushed his throttle to take off power. The Merlin's 1,500 horses pulled Dakota forward at faster tail, coming up runway lights, blurring past 50 knots, 70, 90, 110. Stick back. The nose lifted. The rumbling stopped. Smooth air. Wheels up. Climb power. Below him, England disappeared into morning mist. Above him, stars faded as the sky turned from black to deep blue. He checked his instruments. Manifold pressure 45 inches. RPM 2,700. Oil pressure 80 psi. Coolant temp climbing through 100 degrees. Everything normal, everything working. He joined formation on Kincaid's right wing. Hayes fell in behind. Lowell completed the foreship. 36 P-51s climbed through 10,000 feet, 15,000, 20,000. At 23,000 feet, they leveled off. The temperature outside was minus 42 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to freeze gun mechanisms, cold enough to kill an unprotected pilot in minutes. Merritt adjusted his oxygen flow, checked his fuel, 290 gallons internal, 275-gallon drop tanks. The English coast passed below. The channel stretched ahead. Silver water, winter sun low on the horizon, and beyond the channel, the Netherlands. Beyond that, Germany. Beyond that, Oschersleben. Mission 87 had begun. 10:47 in the morning. The bomber stream appeared ahead. 60 B-17 flying fortresses in formation. Aluminum birds with 4 engines and 10 guns each. Flying at 19,000 feet in a defensive box formation designed to maximize overlapping fields of fire. Each B-17 carried a crew of 10. 600 airmen total. Captain Royce Whitman piloted B-17 number 4231367, nicknamed Hell's Angels. 30 years old, 21 combat missions, 6 more and he'd complete his tour, go home, see his wife again. In the ball turret beneath Hell's Angels, Sergeant Clayton Aldridge hunched in a sphere of plexiglass and steel. 21 years old, married 8 months, his wife was pregnant, due in March. Aldridge had never seen a P-51 Mustang before. The P-47 Thunderbolts usually escorted them to the German border, then turned back. The P-38 Lightnings tried to go deeper, but struggled at altitude. Today, something different appeared on their wing. Silver fighters, sleek, fast, inline engines, not radials like the P-47, not twin boom tails like the P-38. "What are those?" Aldridge asked over the intercom. "New fighters," Whitman said. "Mustangs, supposed to escort us all the way. They gonna stay?" "That's what they said." Aldridge watched the silver fighters weave above the bomber formation. 36 of them, 1 for every 2 bombers roughly. Better odds than usual. Maybe today wouldn't be so bad. At 11:02, the radio crackled. "Bandits, 2 o'clock high 30 plus." Aldridge rotated his turret, looked up and right, black dots against the winter sky. Climbing, 30, 40, maybe more. German fighters, Messerschmitt Bf-109s, Focke-Wulf FW-190s, launching from 3 airfields around Brunswick. Climbing fast, positioning for attack. The Luftwaffe had been waiting. Captain Kincaid's voice came through Merritt's headset. "Hawk flight, bogies high, split on my mark. 1 and 3 take northern group, 2 and 4 southern group." "Copy," Merritt replied. "Mark, break now." Kincaid's P-51 rolled left. Lieutenant Lowell followed. Merritt rolled right. Lieutenant Hayes tried to follow, but fell behind, struggling to keep position. Below and ahead, the B-17s tightened formation, guns tracking the approaching enemy fighters. Merritt climbed toward the southern group. 6 Bf-109s, sleek fighters with pointed noses and inline engines. 420 miles per hour top speed, 120mm cannon, 2 13mm machine guns. Dangerous. He closed to 1 mile, half a mile. Visual contact confirmed. Yellow noses, black crosses, Luftwaffe markings. The 109s saw him, turned to engage. Standard fighter versus fighter engagement. 6 against 1. Bad odds. But Merritt had 650 caliber machine guns and 412 rounds per gun and 86 combat missions teaching him how to fight it outnumbered. Dive, attack, extend, climb, reset. Never stay in a turning fight. Speed is life. He dove. The lead 109 tried to follow, couldn't match the Mustang's acceleration, fell behind. Merritt extended to 2 miles, reversed, climbed back to altitude. The 109s had scattered looking for him. He checked his fuel, 283 gallons. Drop tanks still attached, plenty of fuel. He checked the time. 11:11, where was Kincaid? He keyed his radio. "Hawk Lad Hawk 2, Southern Group engaged, 6 bogies. Where are you, static? Hawk Lad, do you copy?" More static. Then Kincaid's voice broken and distant. "Hawk 2, fuel pressure, engine temps, RTB, RTB, return to base." Merritt's chest tightened. "Say again, Hawk lead." Nothing. He scanned the sky, saw Kincaid's flight 4 miles north turning west, heading back toward England, heading home. Merritt was alone. He looked down. 23,000 feet below the German countryside. Forests, towns, roads. And somewhere ahead, Oschersleben. Above him, 6 Bf-109s reforming. Below him, 60 B-17s, 600 airmen. Unprotected except for one P-51B with 2,472 rounds and a pilot who'd made a promise to his wife to come home. He thought about Kansas. 2 daughters. Eleanor waiting. He thought about Burma, 1942. Mission 37. A convoy under attack. 8 P-40s against 12 Zeros. Merritt had peeled off to chase the Zeros. Got 5 kills. The convoy burned. 73 men died because he'd chosen glory over duty. He'd carried that failure for 2 years. Not today. Today he'd choose differently. Merritt pushed the throttle to full combat power. The Merlin engine howled, 440 miles per hour in level flight. He turned back toward the bombers, toward the fight, toward 30 German fighters that were forming up for attack. Clayton Aldridge in the ball turret of Hell's Angels watched the lone silver P-51 turn back. "One of them's coming back," he said over the intercom. "One," Whitman said. "Where are the others?" "Gone, heading west. Just one left." Whitman looked out his left window, saw the lone Mustang accelerating toward the German formation. "Why isn't he leaving?" the co-pilot asked. "I don't know," Whitman said, but somewhere, somehow he understood. That pilot wasn't leaving because leaving meant the bombers would die. And some men won't leave, can't leave, even when the math says they should, even when survival says run. Some men turn back toward the fire instead of away from it. At 11:14 in the morning, 30 German fighters dove towards 60 unprotected B-17 bombers. One P-51B Mustang dove to meet them. The engagement that would rewrite fighter doctrine was about to begin. 37 minutes until the bombers reached complete safety. 2,472 rounds. One pilot who'd already failed once and refused to fail again. Major Dalton J. Merritt armed his guns. Flipped 6 switches. 6 red lights turned green. He checked his gun sight. Illuminated reticle. 50 mil circle. He checked his fuel. 290 gallons. Enough for 37 minutes. Maybe. He checked his oxygen. Flowing steady. Minus 42 degrees outside. The cold would freeze his guns eventually. The question was, when? The lead German fighters opened fire at 800 yards. Too far. Rounds fell short. Merritt didn't fire. Waited. Closed the distance. 700 yards. 600. 500. At 400 yards, he pressed the trigger. All 6 guns fired. The sound was like thunder compressed into 3 seconds. 90 rounds downrange. 15 per gun. Armor-piercing incendiary tracers walking through the air at 2,800 feet per second. The trailing FW-190 flew directly into the stream of fire. Rounds shredded the tail section. Metal peeled back. The horizontal stabilizer separated. Elevator cables snapped. The 190 tumbled. No control. Just a falling piece of metal with a man inside. At 22,000 feet, the pilot bailed out. White parachute blossomed against the winter sky. First kill. Merritt's ammunition counter clicked down. 2,382 rounds remaining. He pulled up hard. 7 Gs crushed him into his seat. Blood drained from his head. His vision grayed at the edges. Tunnel vision. Peripheral darkness closing in. He eased back pressure. Vision returned. On altitude 25,000 feet. Below him, the German formation scattered. They hadn't expected aggression. Standard American fighter doctrine called for defensive escort. Stay close to the bombers. Protect them like shepherds guarding sheep. Merritt wasn't protecting, he was hunting. He rolled inverted, spotted a Bf-109 below climbing toward the bombers. Inverted dive. 500 miles per hour. Wind screaming over the canopy. The 109 didn't see him. Merritt rolled upright 200 feet above the 109. Dropped onto its tail. 2-second burst. 60 rounds. The 109's canopy exploded. Plexiglass and metal fragments spiraled away. The fighter snap-rolled left and dove. Merritt didn't follow. Scanned for threats. Found one. Another FW-190 3 o'clock low. He kicked the rudder, skidded sideways, lined up the shot. 2-second burst. 60 rounds. The 190's right-wing root erupted. Fuel tank detonated. Orange and black fireball at 24,000 feet. Third kill in 40 seconds. Ammunition 2,262 rounds. 91% remaining. Below, Clayton Aldridge watched from the ball turret of Hell's Angels. He just got 3, Aldridge said. 3 in less than a minute. How many left, Whitman asked. 27, maybe more. They're splitting up. The German formation divided. 15 fighters broke left toward the bombers. 15 stayed to deal with the lone Mustang. Both groups expected the American to break off. Fighter doctrine was clear. Never engage when outnumbered more than 2-1. Merritt had 15-1 odds in front of him, 12-1 behind. He kept attacking. His first pass had scattered them. Now he climbed back to 24,000 feet, positioned himself between the bombers and the regrouping fighters. The Germans hadn't expected this. They'd expected one fighter to kill a few stragglers, then run for home when the odds turned bad. Instead, that fighter was climbing back up, putting itself between them and their target, challenging them. At 11:17, three BF-109s came at Merritt head-on. Closing speed exceeded 700 miles per hour. Both sides at full throttle flying directly at each other. In 6 seconds, they'd collide or someone would break. Merritt didn't break. The Germans opened fire at 600 yards. Yellow tracers streaked past Merritt's canopy. Above, below, left, right. None hit. Merritt's tracers walked up the lead 109's nose. 50 caliber rounds at that range carried 11,000 foot-pounds of energy each, enough to punch through aluminum, through steel, through engine blocks. The 109's Daimler-Benz engine took multiple hits. Coolant lines ruptured. White steam jetted from the cowling. At 200 yards, the 109 broke left. Merritt pulled 8 Gs. His vision went black. Complete blackout. Blood couldn't reach his brain under that load. He eased back. Vision returned. The damaged 109 trailed white coolant against the winter sky. Engine dying, pilot looking for a place to land. Fourth kill. The other two 109s scattered. Merritt reversed hard. Found another target. FW-90 2 miles away, diving toward the bombers. He rolled inverted. Pulled toward the earth. Dove after the 190. 3-second burst at 400 yards. 90 rounds. The 190's right wing folded at the root. Structural failure. The metal couldn't take the stress. The fighter tumbled, pieces breaking off. Wing, tail, the pilot never got out. Fifth kill, ammunition 1,872 rounds remaining, 76%. Clayton Aldridge counted. 5 in 4 minutes. He's not stopping. Inside the Luftwaffe formation, Hauptmann Victor von Arnstedt watched the lone Mustang carve through his fighters. Von Arnstedt was 35 years old, 51 confirmed kills. Knight's Cross recipient. He'd flown over Britain in 1940, over Russia in 41 and 42, over France in 43. He knew fighter combat, knew tactics, knew when a pilot was good and when a pilot was great. This American was great. Von Arnstedt keyed his radio, spoke in German. All units, sandwich formation, 2 elements head-on, 1 element high, box him in. The German fighters reformed. 4 FW-190s came straight at Merritt. 4 more climbed above, positioning for a dive attack. Classic trap. If Merritt engaged the head-on group, the high group would dive on him. If he climbed to engage the high group, the head-on group would hit the bombers. No good options. Merritt saw it developing. He'd seen it before. Burma. The Japanese had tried the same thing. He'd learned a counter, fake the head-on pass, break hard before gun range. The diving fighters would commit expecting him to be where he wasn't. They'd overshoot. He'd reverse onto their tails. Theory, he'd never tried it outnumbered this badly. He committed. Flew straight at the 4 head-on FW-190s. 500 yards, 400, 300. The Germans opened fire. 20-millimeter cannon rounds, 13-millimeter machine gun fire, a wall of metal. At 200 yards, Merritt broke hard right, 9 Gs. His vision collapsed to a pinpoint. His body weighed 1,800 pounds under that load. The 4 diving 190s saw him break, adjusted their dives, predicted where he'd be. Merritt reversed. Hard left, back the other direction. The diving fighters overshot, couldn't correct at that speed. Merritt climbed behind them, found the trailing 190 in his gun sight. 3-second burst, 90 rounds. The 190's tail sheared off completely. Control surfaces gone. The fighter entered an uncontrollable tumble. 6th kill, ammunition 1,782 rounds, 72%. Time 11:26, 27 minutes until the bombers reached complete safety. 24 German fighters still circling, and now Merritt's guns were jamming. The P-51B's 650 caliber Browning M2 machine guns were mounted 3 per wing, designed to fire in extreme conditions. High altitude, high speed, high G-forces. But they had limits. At 11:26, Merritt's right outboard gun stopped firing. The gun had cycled too fast. overheated to 300 degrees during sustained fire, then hit minus 42-degree air at 24,000 feet. The metal contracted. The bolt seized mid-cycle. Standard procedure was break off when guns malfunctioned, return to base, land, repair, fight another day. Merritt had 5 working guns and 24 German fighters still threatening 600 airmen. He stayed. He climbed back to altitude, positioned himself between bombers and Germans. The Luftwaffe pilots were adjusting. They'd watched this lone Mustang for 13 minutes. They knew his patterns now. He attacked from above. He targeted leaders. He extended away using superior speed. So they changed tactics. At 11:28, 8 FW-190s split into 2 4-ship formations. One stayed high as bait, 25,000 feet. One dropped low out of sight below the bombers, 18,000 feet. They were setting a bracket. When Merritt dove on the high formation, the low formation would climb into his escape route. Box him in, end this. Merritt saw the trap, took the bait anyway. He came down on the high 4 at a 60-degree angle, airspeed building past 480 miles per hour. The P-51's dive speed was limited by compressibility effects at Mach 0.75. Above that, shock waves formed on the wings. Control surfaces lost effectiveness. The airplane shook, sometimes broke apart. Merritt was pushing it. His 4 working wing guns and 2 nose guns poured fire into the lead FW-190. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds walked from tail to cockpit. The 190 rolled inverted. Pilot bailing out. White parachute at 23,000 feet. 7th kill. Merritt pulled up hard. 7 Gs. Blood draining from his head. Vision tunneling to a pinpoint. Gray edges closing in. He eased back pressure. Peripheral vision returned. The 4 fighters that had been hidden below were exactly where he expected, climbing toward him at 3,000 feet per minute. BMW radial engines at full emergency power. He rolled inverted and dove at them. The German element leader saw a Mustang diving upside down directly at his formation at 500 miles per hour. And he broke. Confusion, fear, survival instinct. Fighter pilots trained to expect rational behavior. Predictable tactics, doctrine-based maneuvers. This wasn't rational. This was insane. The formation scattered. Merritt rolled upright, lined up on the trailing 190, 3-second burst from 4 working guns. The 190's tail section disintegrated. Control surfaces gone. The fighter tumbled. 8th kill. His left inboard gun stopped firing. 4 guns remaining. 1,600 rounds total. Time 11:34. 13 minutes until relief. 19 German fighters remaining. And Major Dalton J. Merritt, former Flying Tiger, current commander of Hawk Flight, was the only American fighter between 60 bombers and destruction. He could see P-47 Thunderbolts in the distance now. Black dots on the western horizon. The relief force. Coming fast. 13 minutes away. He had to hold for 13 more minutes. 13 minutes with 4 guns, 1,600 rounds, and German fighters who'd stopped underestimating him. They knew now. This American wasn't leaving. Wasn't running. Wasn't playing defense. He was fighting to kill them all or die trying. And 13 minutes is a very long time when men are trying to murder you at 400 miles per hour. Merritt checked his fuel gauge. 231 gallons. Checked his oxygen. Warning light flickering. Checked his engine temperature. Climbing. Not critical yet, but climbing. The bomber formation flew steady below him. 60 B-17s. 600 men who had no idea one pilot was holding off an entire Jagdgeschwader. No idea their survival depended on a man who'd failed once before and swore he'd never fail again. Mission 87, Part 1 complete. 13 minutes remaining until relief. 4 guns, 1,600 rounds, 19 enemies. The hardest minutes were still ahead. 11:34 in the morning, 13 minutes until relief. 19 German fighters circling like wolves around wounded prey. Major Dalton Merritt's left inboard gun had just seized. 4 guns remaining out of 6. 1,600 rounds across those 4 barrels. At his current rate of fire, 90 rounds per 3-second burst. That gave him 17 attacks, maybe 18 if he used shorter bursts. The Germans had 22 minutes of ammunition remaining. Plenty to finish this. Merritt climbed back to 24,000 feet. The Merlin engine ran smooth despite 20 minutes of combat power. Oil pressure steady at 78 psi. Coolant temperature climbing through 190 degrees, but still in the green. Fuel consumption running 2.1 gallons per minute. He had maybe 90 minutes of fuel remaining at this power setting. The bombers needed 13 more minutes of protection. The math worked. Barely, if nothing else went wrong. At 24,000 feet, temperature was minus 42 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to freeze exposed skin in seconds, cold enough to turn gun oil to sludge, cold enough to make metal brittle and prone to failure. Merritt's hands were numb inside his gloves despite the cockpit heater running full. His oxygen mask pressed against his face, each breath visible as frost on the rubber seal. 3 hours in the cockpit, 20 minutes of continuous combat. His body ached from sustained G-forces. His vision had grayed out twice from blood loss to the brain during hard pulls. His heart hammered at 140 beats per minute, but his mind was clear, focused, calculating. The German formation was reforming. Tighter this time. Rata pairs, finger four elements. They'd learned from 20 minutes of watching him fight. They wouldn't scatter anymore. They'd stay together. Mutual support, overlapping fields of fire. Professional pilots. Experienced. Dangerous. Hauptmann Victor von Arnstedt led the reformation. His voice crackled over the German radio frequencies, speaking in rapid German that Merritt couldn't understand but could interpret from the formation changes. New tactics, different approach. They were adapting. Below in the ball turret of Hell's Angels, Sergeant Clayton Aldridge watched the lone Mustang reposition between the bombers and the regrouping Germans. "He's still up there," Aldridge said over the intercom. 20 minutes now, hasn't left." Captain Whitman checked his watch. 11:34. The P-47 relief force was due at 11:47. 13 minutes. "Can he last that long?" the co-pilot asked. Whitman didn't answer, didn't know, had never seen anything like this. One fighter, 20-plus enemies, 20 minutes of sustained combat. The fuel alone should have forced him to leave by now. The ammunition, the mechanical stress on the airplane, the physical stress on the pilot. But that silver P-51 kept climbing back up, kept positioning, kept fighting. At 11:35, the German formation dove. Not scattered attacks this time. Coordinated. 3 waves. First wave, 8 fighters targeting the lead bomber squadron. Second wave, 7 fighters going for the high squadron. Third wave, 4 fighters positioned to catch stragglers. Textbook Luftwaffe doctrine. Overwhelming force. Multiple attack axes. Divide the escorts. Destroy the bombers. There was only one escort. Merritt hit the first wave head-on. He picked the leftmost F-190, fired a 1-second burst, 30 rounds from 4 guns. Tracers converged on the 190's engine cowling. The cowling shattered. Pieces flew back, hitting the cockpit glass. The fighter rolled away, trailing black smoke from a damaged BMW radio. Not a confirmed kill, but damaged. Out of the fight, Merritt pulled vertical, used his speed to climb above the second wave. They were committed to their attack run on the bombers, couldn't follow him up without breaking off. At the top of his climb, 26,000 feet, he hammer-headed, nose over, dove back down onto their tails, lined up the trailing Bf-109. 1-second burst, 30 rounds. The 109's tail sheared off. Complete structural failure. The fighter tumbled end over end. 9th kill. His right inboard gun seized. 3 guns remaining. The cold was killing them one by one. Metal contracting. Bolts jamming. The physics of sustained high-altitude combat catching up. 3 guns. 1,540 rounds total. 513 rounds per gun. 17 attacks left. Maybe 20 if he used half-second bursts. The third wave was climbing toward him. 4 fighters, fresh, undamaged. Pilots who'd been watching and learning from the first 2 waves. Merritt was out of airspeed from the vertical maneuver, out of altitude advantage. Below them now at 23,000 feet, they had the sun, they had numbers, they had working guns. Standard fighter tactics said run, build speed, extend away, reset the engagement. Merritt turned into them and climbed. The lead German pilot expected the Mustang to dive away. Instead, it was climbing straight at him. Head on again. Both pilots opened fire at 400 yards. Merritt's 3 remaining guns rattled 90 rounds downrange in 3 seconds. 30 rounds per gun. The Germans' rounds walked up toward the P-51's nose. 20mm cannon shells and 13mm machine gun fire converging. At 100 yards, both pilots should have broken. Neither did. At 50 yards, the Bf-109's propeller exploded. Metal fragments shredded through its own Daimler-Benz engine. Coolant sprayed, oil misted. The 109 snap-rolled left. Pilot didn't get out. 10th kill. Merritt flashed through the formation at 420 miles per hour. 3 fighters behind him now, all firing. Tracers passed above his canopy, below his wings. One round punched through his left horizontal stabilizer, leaving a ragged hole 6 inches across. Another clipped his right aileron, tearing off a chunk of aluminum. The P-51 shuddered. Control got mushy. Elevator response delayed. Not critical, but damaged. He shoved the stick forward, dove for the cloud deck at 15,000 feet. The Germans followed. Inside the clouds, Merritt pulled the throttle back. Reduced power to 1,800 RPM, slowed to 200 knots. Rolled inverted, waited 10 seconds in the gray nothingness. No visual reference, just instruments. Altimeter unwinding. Airspeed steady, rolled upright, pulled up hard. 4 Gs, climbed back through the cloud tops, broke back out above the clouds at 16,000 feet, behind the pursuing Germans. They'd overshot, expected him to keep diving. Instead, he was on their tails now. He picked the last fighter in the string, an FW-190, 2-second burst, 60 rounds. The 190's canopy blew off. Explosive decompression at altitude. Pilot slumped forward. The fighter entered a flat spin. 11th kill, his left wing gun seized. 2 guns remaining, 160 rounds total, 80 rounds per gun. At 3 seconds per burst, 90 rounds expended, he had less than 2 full attacks left. Maybe 3 if he used 1-second bursts, time 11:40. 7 minutes until relief. The formation was scattered again. Merritt climbed back to 24,000 feet. Fuel remaining 203 gallons. Still enough. The Merlin engine was sipping fuel at cruise climb, burning only 1.6 gallons per minute on the ascent. But combat power would drain it fast. 2.1 gallons per minute. Maybe 2.3 at full throttle. He could see the P-47 Thunderbolts clearly now. Black dots resolving into recognizable aircraft shapes. 36 of them. Republic P-47s with their distinctive radial engines and thick fuselages. 6 minutes out. The Germans were regrouping. 18 fighters left. Merritt had killed 11, damaged 2 more, 28% casualties. But they still had numbers, still had ammunition, still had working guns. And now they were focused entirely on him. They'd stopped trying to reach the bombers. This had become personal. One American had humiliated an entire Jagdgeschwader, killed 11 of their comrades, made them look like amateurs. Time to end it. All 18 German fighters formed up line abreast. A formation designed for one purpose: create an inescapable wall of fire. 18 fighters spread across 2 miles of sky. When they opened fire, their combined guns would create a killing zone half a mile wide and 200 yards tall. No evasion possible, no escape route. Just fly through it or die. Merritt watched them form up, calculated distances, angles, closure rates. He had 160 rounds. They had thousands. He checked his watch. 11:41. 6 minutes until the P-47s arrived. 6 minutes might as well be 6 hours. The German formation accelerated toward him. Line abreast, perfect spacing, professional execution, range 1,000 yards, 900, 800. At 700 yards, they opened fire. Too early, excited. Rounds fell away before reaching Merritt's altitude. He waited. 600 yards, 500. At 400 yards, he fired. 3-second burst from 2 guns, 60 rounds. His tracers converged on the center aircraft, a Bf-109. The fighter's wing root erupted. Fuel tank detonated. Orange fireball at 23,000 feet. The formation split around the explosion. Merritt dove through the gap. 12th kill. Maybe. The explosion obscured the result. Gun camera might not have caught it clearly. 100 rounds remaining. He pulled up on the other side, rolled, climbed. The Germans reformed behind him. 18 left now. Maybe 17 if that last one counted. Tighter formation. No gaps this time. They closed again. Merritt turned toward them. Range 800 yards. 700, 600. He fired his last 100 rounds in one continuous burst. 4 seconds of fire. Both guns empty. Click, click, click. He saw strikes on an FW-190's cowling. The fighter broke away smoking. Might have been a kill. Might not. Too far to confirm. 0 rounds remaining. The Germans knew. They'd counted his engagements, calculated his ammunition load based on aircraft type, run the math. He was Winchester. Out of ammo, defenseless. 18 German fighters closed on one unarmed P-51. This was the end. They'd finish this now. Merritt kept attacking. No guns, no ammunition, just speed and fury. Merritt dove at the nearest Bf-109. The German pilot saw him coming, saw the Mustang's guns weren't firing. No muzzle flash, no tracers. He held his course, expected Merritt to break off at the last second. Merritt didn't break. He lined up on the 109's tail, close to 50 feet. The German broke first. Dove away, survival instinct overriding training. Merritt followed him down to 18,000 feet, stayed on his tail. The 109 leveled out, tried to extend, couldn't. The Mustang was faster. Merritt closed to 20 feet, his propeller inches from the 109's tail. The German pilot looked back, saw the Mustang's spinner filling his vision, saw death 6 feet behind him. He broke hard left, nearly stalled, recovered, dove for the deck. Gone. Out of the fight. Terrified. One enemy neutralized without firing a shot. Merritt climbed back to 23,000 feet. Time bomb to 11:43, 4 minutes until relief. 18 German fighters remaining, 0 ammunition. His oxygen warning light was solid red now. Low pressure, system failing. Each breath came harder, hypoxia creeping in at the edges. Fingers tingling, vision narrowing. He shook his head, focused. 4 minutes. Just 4 more minutes. The Germans formed up again, came at him again. Merritt dove at another Bf-109. No guns firing, just intimidation. The German held his course for 3 seconds, then broke. Merritt followed through the break, stayed on his tail through 2 full rolling scissors. Left roll, left again. 40 seconds of pure maneuvering. Neither could get an advantage. The German was good, skilled, experienced. Merritt was better. 86 combat missions better. Flying Tiger's tactics. Claire Chennault's teachings. Hit and run, energy management, angles and speed. After 40 seconds, the German disengaged, dove away, gave up. 2 fighters neutralized, 0 shots fired. The German formation leader made a decision, split the force. 8 fighters stayed high to engage the Mustang. Keep him busy, tie him up. 9 fighters dove for the bombers. The actual mission. The reason they'd launched in the first place. Destroy the American bombers before they could drop their ordnance on the Focke-Wulf factory. Merritt had to choose. Fight the 8 or save the bombers from the 9. He couldn't do both. He thought about Burma, 1942. The convoy burning, 73 dead because he'd chosen wrong. He turned toward the 9 diving fighters, caught them at 19,000 feet, came in from their 7 o'clock high, positioned perfectly for a gun run, lined up on the leader. Didn't fire because he couldn't. The German leader saw him coming, broke hard right, assumed this was a trap, assumed other Mustangs were hiding in the sun, assumed no pilot would attack without ammunition unless it was bait. His wingman followed. The formation scattered. Merritt picked another target, close to 30 feet behind an FW-190. The German looked back, saw the Mustang, no muzzle flashes. But he broke anyway, dove away. Merritt chased 2 more fighters, got on their tails. They both disengaged. The 9-fighter attack was broken, 0 shots fired, pure psychological warfare. But now the 8 fighters that had stayed high were diving on him. Merritt pulled up to meet them. His airspeed bled off, 190 knots, 170, 150. Stall speed was 120 knots. He was hanging on his propeller. Almost no airspeed, almost no energy. The Germans opened fire at 200 yards. Rounds passed below him. He kicked rudder, kitted left. More rounds, tracers streaking past. He shoved the nose down, dove away, built speed, 200 knots, 250, 300. Pulled back up. The Germans had overshot. Time 11:45. 2 minutes until relief. Fuel 175 gallons. Critically low for combat operations, but enough to get home if he left now. The bombers were 5 minutes from safety. The P-47s were 2 minutes out. If he left now, he'd miss them by 3 minutes. 3 minutes where 60 bombers would face 18 German fighters alone. 3 minutes. 180 seconds. Enough time for the Germans to destroy half the formation. Merritt stayed. The Germans reformed. All 18. They'd stopped trying fancy tactics, stopped trying to outfly him. They were going to use mass and firepower. 18 fighters in a loose formation, coming straight at him. No traps, no tricks, just overwhelming force. Merritt turned toward them. At 11:46, 1 minute before relief, 18 German fighters and 1 unarmed American P-51 Mustang closed on each other at a combined speed of 800 miles per hour. Inside Hell's Angels, Captain Whitman watched through his side window. "He's turning into them," Whitman said. "No ammunition. He's turning into them." "Why?" the co-pilot asked. "Because," Whitman said quietly, "he's buying us one more minute." And Clayton Aldridge in the ball turret counted the seconds. "Watch the lone Mustang fly straight at 18 enemies. 30 seconds until the P-47s get here," Aldridge said. "Come on, come on." The range closed. 400 yards, 300, 200. The Germans opened fire. All 18 aircraft. Every gun, a storm of metal. 20-millimeter cannon shells. 13-millimeter machine gun rounds. Tracers creating a spiderweb of fire. Merritt flew through it. Rounds passed above, below, left, right. One punched through his left wing, missing the fuel tank by 8 inches. Another took a chunk out of his right elevator. The P-51 shuddered, vibrated. Control surfaces damaged. But still flying, he flew straight through the formation, didn't deviate, didn't flinch. 18 German fighters scattered around him like startled birds. He emerged on the other side, rolled, climbed, checked his wings, holes, damage, but nothing critical. Checked his fuel, 161 gallons. Checked his watch, 11:47, and then he heard it. American voices on the radio. "Boxed at escort, this is Wolfpack lead. We have you visual, forming up now." The P-47 Thunderbolts, 36 Republic P-47s, big, heavy, powerful, each one carrying 850 caliber machine guns and enough ammunition to fight for an hour. They swept in from the west like cavalry, arriving at the last moment, black and white invasion stripes on their wings. Unmistakable. The relief force. Hauptmann Victor von Arnstedt watched the P-47s approach. Calculated quickly. 18 German fighters against 36 American P-47s, plus one very dangerous Mustang. The math had changed. 2-to-1 odds against. His pilots were low on ammunition, tired from 30 minutes of continuous combat. Damaged aircraft. Wounded men. And that lone Mustang pilot had proven something in the last 30 minutes. He wouldn't quit. Wouldn't leave. Would die before letting the bombers fall. Von Arnstedt had 51 kills. He'd survived 4 years of combat over 3 continents. He knew when to press an attack and when to preserve his force. He keyed his radio one final time. Switched to the American frequency. Spoke in accented but clear English. "American pilot in the Mustang. You have earned the sky today." Merritt's hand froze on the stick. The German voice. Direct. Respectful. "Why?" Merritt asked. A pause. "Then, because honor matters more than victory. You chose duty. We choose to let you live to see your choice rewarded. Fly home, pilot." The radio went silent. Von Arnstedt switched back to German frequencies. "All units, von Arnstedt, break off attack." A young pilot protested. "Herr Hauptmann, we can still—" "Das ist ein Befehl," von Arnstedt snapped. "That is an order. Heading 090. Return to base." At 11:47 in the morning, 18 German fighters turned east, headed back to their air bases around Brunswick. They weren't fleeing the P-47s. The Thunderbolts were still 90 seconds away from effective gun range. They were choosing to leave. Merritt watched them go, disbelieving at first, waiting for the trick, the reversal, the final attack, but they kept going, heading east, getting smaller, disappearing into the winter sky. It was over, 30 minutes of continuous combat. From 11:14 when he'd first engaged until 11:44 when the Germans withdrew. 30 minutes exactly. 11 confirmed kills, maybe 13 if the last 2 were verified. 7 or more fighters driven off or damaged. 60 B-17 bombers defended. 600 airmen protected. 0 bombers lost to fighter attack. 1 P-51 Mustang. 2 guns working but empty. Fuel critically low. Oxygen failing, airframe damaged. But still flying. A P-47 pulled alongside Merritt's left wing. The pilot looked over, gave a thumbs up. Merritt nodded, too exhausted to return the gesture. The P-47 pilot's voice came through the radio. "Nice work, Mustang. We'll take it from here." Merritt keyed his microphone. His voice was hoarse, dry. He'd been breathing pure oxygen for 3 hours at minus 42 degrees. "Copy, Wolfpack. Heading home. Fuel state critical." "Roger, safe flight." Merritt turned west, followed the bomber stream. The B-17s were still in formation. Every single one, to me. No stragglers, no damaged aircraft falling behind. 60 bombers, all intact, because one pilot refused to leave them. His fuel gauge read 147 gallons. England was 76 minutes away. At cruise power, he'd burn roughly 1.1 gallons per minute, 84 gallons needed. He had 147, 63 gallons margin, comfortable. Except his engine was coughing. Merritt heard it first, a slight miss, a hesitation in the smooth rumble of the Merlin V12. Then he felt it. A vibration through the airframe. Not severe, but there. His coolant temperature gauge was climbing, still in the green, but climbing through 200 degrees. Oil pressure was dropping. Slowly, not dangerously, but dropping from 78 to 72 psi. The engine had been at combat power for 30 minutes straight. Maximum continuous power rating for the Merlin was 5 minutes. He'd run it 6 times beyond recommended limits. Metal fatigues, gaskets fail, seals leak. The engine was wounded, dying slowly. He reduced power to cruise, 1900 RPM, 32 inches manifold pressure. The coughing smoothed out. The vibration lessened, but it didn't stop. At 12:03, he crossed the German border into the Netherlands. Friendly airspace, relatively. The Netherlands was occupied German territory, but the Luftwaffe presence was lighter here. Fuel 118 gallons, 58 minutes from England at current consumption. At 12:23, he crossed the English coast, the white cliffs of Dover below. Home, fuel 11 gallons. The engine coughed again, harder this time. The propeller windmilled, stopped. Windmilled again, fuel starvation. The gauge was reading 11 gallons, but fuel slosh in the tank meant the pickup wasn't getting consistent flow. He switched tanks, adjusted the fuel mixture, leaned it out. The engine smoothed temporarily. RAF Boxted was 28 miles ahead, 5 minutes at current speed of 180 knots. He started descending. Trade altitude for distance. If the engine quit, he'd glide. At 12:48, he was at 5,000 feet, 3 miles from Boxted. Fuel gauge reading 6 gallons. Engine running rough, very rough. At 12:50, the engine died. Complete power loss. Propeller windmilling in the airstream, but not producing thrust. Merritt was 200 feet above the runway threshold. Gear down, flaps extended. He had one chance. Dead stick landing. No power, no go-around possible. The P-51 dropped. Nose heavy without engine power. He pulled back on the stick. Bled airspeed to maintain altitude. 120 knots, 115, 110. Stall speed was 105. The runway was right there. 200 yards ahead, 100 feet above ground. 100 knots, 50 feet, 95 knots. The stall warning horn blaring. 20 feet, 90 knots. The runway threshold passed beneath him. 10 feet, 85 knots. Below stall speed. The P-51 was falling, not flying. He pulled back hard. Flared. The tail dropped. The main gear touched concrete. Screech of rubber. The airplane bounced once. Settled. Rolling. No brakes. No hydraulic pressure without engine power. Just friction and drag slowing him down. The P-51 rolled 1,500 feet before stopping. Dead center of the runway. Perfectly aligned. Merritt sat motionless for 10 seconds. Hands on the stick. Feet on the rudder pedals. Then he reached up and shut off the fuel selector. Shut off the magnetos. Shut off the battery. Silence. After 3 hours and 37 minutes of engine noise, the silence was deafening. Ground crew trucks raced toward him. Fire trucks. Ambulance. The whole airfield had been listening to the radio chatter. They knew something extraordinary had happened. Merritt unstrapped his harness. Oxygen mask. Helmet. He tried to stand, his legs buckled. 3 hours cramped in a cockpit. 30 minutes of sustained G-forces. His muscles had turned to jelly. He gripped the canopy rail, pulled himself up, climbed out onto the wing. Sergeant Kowalski was there. Crew chief, the man who'd prepared Dakota for this mission. "Major," Kowalski said, "are you hit? Are you wounded?" "No," Merritt said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Airplane's hit. I'm fine." Kowalski helped him down from the wing. Other crew members gathered, staring at the P-51. One of them started counting holes. 1 through the stabilizer, 1 through the aileron, 3, no 4 through the left wing, 2 through the fuselage, 3 20-millimeter strikes. Jesus, 3 20s. 37 bullet holes total. Any one of them could have hit something critical. Fuel line, hydraulics, control cables. Dakota had taken 37 hits and brought Merritt home. Kowalski walked around the airplane slowly, looking at the damage, the seized guns, the empty ammunition boxes. How many did you get, Major? Merritt leaned against the fuselage, exhausted. Maybe 3, maybe 4. Hard to tell in the fight. You were up there a long time. Radio chatter said, they said you were alone. Fighting alone. 30 minutes, Merritt said. Felt longer. An intelligence officer arrived. Captain, clipboard, pencil. Major Merritt, I need to debrief you. How many enemy aircraft destroyed? Gun camera will show better than I can tell you. Maybe 11, maybe 12. The intelligence officer stopped writing, looked up. 11, 12. How many engaged you? Started with 30, ended with 18. 30 enemy aircraft and you engaged alone. Didn't have much choice. They were diving on the bombers. The intelligence officer wrote rapidly, then looked at Merritt, really looked at him. Saw the exhaustion, the 1,000-yard stare, the trembling hands. Get to the medical tent, Major. They need to check you out. I'm fine. That's an order, sir. Merritt nodded, started walking. Made it 10 steps before a medic intercepted him with a jeep. At 1:37 in the afternoon, the 401st Bomb Group landed at their base in Dinathorpe. 60 B-17s, every single one. Captain Whitman climbed out of Hell's Angels. His legs were shaking. Not from fear, from the realization of what could have happened, what didn't happen because of one pilot. Clayton Aldridge had climbed out of the ball turret. 21 years old, wife 8 months pregnant. He'd just survived his 14th combat mission because a man he'd never met had refused to leave. Aldridge found the group intelligence officer. Sir, I need to report something. What is it, Sergeant? There was one fighter, one P-51, alone, for over 30 minutes. He saved us, all of us. Who was he? The intelligence officer didn't know. Started asking other crews. Same story. 18 different bomber crews, all reporting the same thing. One P-51, call sign unknown, pilot unknown, fighting alone for over half an hour. The 8th Air Force launched an investigation, checked mission logs, checked radio transcripts, checked every fighter unit that had been airborne. Only one P-51 had stayed with the bombers that long. Aircraft number 436315. Dakota. Pilot Major Dalton J. Merritt. Flight records confirmed he'd landed with 6 gallons of fuel. Gun camera footage showed 11 confirmed kills. Multiple witnesses from bomber crews confirmed defensive actions that saved the formation. On January 13th, 2 days after the mission, Lieutenant General Ira Eaker, commander of 8th Air Force, visited RAF Boxted. He wanted to interview Merritt personally. They sat in the squadron operations room. Eaker, Merritt, a stenographer taking notes. Describe the engagement, Major. Merritt did, briefly, factually, no embellishment. 30 minutes of combat, 11 kills, ran out of ammunition, kept attacking. Germans withdrew. P-47s arrived. Eaker listened, asked questions, made notes. When Merritt finished, Eaker sat back, studied the pilot in front of him. 33 years old, former Flying Tiger, 87 combat missions. Looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 days. You fought 30 German fighters alone for 30 minutes. Yes, sir. You ran out of ammunition and continued to attack. Yes, sir. Why didn't you break off? Merritt was quiet for a moment. Then 600 airmen, sir, they had families. They were counting on us. I wasn't going to be the reason they didn't make it home. Eaker nodded slowly. I'm recommending you for the Medal of Honor. Merritt blinked. Sir, I was just doing my job. Your job was to escort bombers. You did that. But what you did beyond that, Eaker stood. That was something else entirely. That was valor. The recommendation went through, fast. Usually Medal of Honor approvals took months. Merritt's took 6 weeks. Politics, timing. The Air Force needed a hero, needed proof that the P-51 Mustang worked, needed something to show the American public that daylight bombing wasn't a suicide mission. Major Dalton J. Merritt became that proof. Part 2 complete. The hardest minutes were survived. The bombers were safe. The pilot was home. But the story wasn't over yet. January 18th, 1944. 7 days after the mission. RAF Boxted was quiet. Morning fog hung low over the airfield. Ground crews worked on P-51s in the cold. Pilots gathered in the mess hall for breakfast. Major Dalton Merritt sat alone at a corner table. Coffee, toast. He hadn't slept well since the mission. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the fight replaying. The Germans diving, the bombers exposed. The decision to stay. He'd been grounded for 3 days after the mission. Medical orders. Flight surgeon said he needed rest. Physical and mental recovery from sustained high-G combat. Merritt had argued, lost, spent 3 days in his tent staring at 87 tally marks on the wall. Mission 87 had changed something. He could feel it but couldn't name it. The door to the mess hall opened. Cold air rushed in. A group of men entered. Not pilots, not ground crew, bomber crews, B-17 airmen, 20, maybe 30 of them, wearing different unit patches. 401st Bomb Group. They spotted Merritt, walked toward him. Captain Royce Whitman led the group. Pilot of Hell's Angels, 30 years old, 22 combat missions now. Behind him, Sergeant Clayton Aldridge, ball turret gunner, 21 years old. Wife 9 months pregnant now. The mess hall went quiet, everyone watching. Whitman stopped at Merritt's table. The other bomber crews formed a semicircle behind him. Major Merritt, Whitman said. Merritt stood. Yes. I'm Captain Whitman, 401st Bomb Group. We flew the Oschersleben mission, January 11th. I remember. Whitman extended his hand. Merritt shook it. Whitman's grip was firm, tight. He didn't let go for a long moment. We came to say thank you, Whitman said. His voice cracked slightly. All of us, 60 crews, 600 men, we're alive because you stayed. Merritt didn't know what to say, nodded. Aldridge stepped forward, young, barely old enough to drink. Sir, I was in the ball turret. I watched the whole thing. Counted every engagement. 12 times you came back. 12 times. I've never seen anything like it. He paused. His eyes were wet. My wife had our son 3 days ago, January 15th. I got the telegram yesterday. His name is Dalton. We named him after you, sir, because I'm alive to meet him, because you didn't leave us. Merritt felt something break inside his chest. Not pain, something else. Relief, maybe. Validation. He'd spent 2 years carrying the guilt from Burma. 73 men dead because he'd chosen wrong, made the selfish choice. The glory chase. January 11th, he'd chosen differently. Stayed instead of leaving. Protected instead of hunting. And 600 men went home. One of them had a son now, named Dalton. Merritt shook Aldridge's hand. Congratulations, Sergeant, on your son. Thank you, sir, for everything. The other bomber crews came forward one by one, shook his hand, said thank you. Some couldn't speak, just nodded, eyes communicating what words couldn't. After they left, Merritt sat back down. His coffee was cold. He didn't care. For the first time in 2 years, the weight from Burma felt lighter. March 6, 1944, 54 days after the mission. The ceremony was held at RAF Boxted, outdoors despite the cold. The entire 354th Fighter Group assembled, 300 pilots and ground crew, reporters, photographers, Army brass. Brigadier General Jesse Auton stood at a makeshift podium, Medal of Honor and a presentation case beside him. Major Dalton J. Merritt stood at attention in dress uniform, 33 years old, 87 combat missions, soon to be the only fighter pilot in the European theater to receive the Medal of Honor during World War II. General Auton opened the citation. Read aloud. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, March 3, 1863, has awarded in the name of Congress the Medal of Honor to Major Dalton J. Merritt, United States Army Air Forces. The general's voice carried across the assembled formation. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty, in action with the enemy near Oschersleben, Germany on January 11, 1944. He continued reading. The facts, the engagement, 30 German fighters, 60 bombers defended, ammunition exhausted, continued fighting. Major Merritt's extraordinary heroism and selfless devotion to duty resulted in the safe return of 60 heavy bombers and 600 airmen. His actions reflect the highest credit upon himself and the United States Army Air Forces. General Auton removed the medal from its case, stepped forward, placed it around Merritt's neck. The assembled formation saluted. Cameras flashed. Merritt stood perfectly still. The medal hung heavy against his chest, heavier than it should be. Not from the medal's weight, from what it represented. After the ceremony, reporters gathered. Questions, requests for interviews. Merritt answered briefly, politely. He didn't like the attention, didn't want to be a hero, just wanted to fly, do his job, go home to Eleanor and the girls. One reporter asked, "What were you thinking when you decided to stay and fight alone?" Merritt considered the question, gave the honest answer. "I was thinking about men who needed me to make the right choice, and for once I did." The reporter wanted more. Merritt didn't give it, excused himself, walked back to his tent. Inside, he sat on his cot, looked at the medal, looked at the photographs above his bed. Eleanor, 2 daughters, waiting in Kansas. He'd made a promise before leaving. Come home. Don't be a hero. He'd broken half that promise, but he was still alive, still flying. 26 more missions before his tour was complete. 26 more chances to make it home. He pinned the medal to his footlocker, added an 88th tally mark to the wall. Tomorrow he'd fly mission 88. The mission changed everything. Before January 11th, fighter doctrine was defensive. Stay close to bombers. Protect the formation. Don't chase. Don't pursue. Shepherds guarding sheep. After Merritt's mission doctrine changed, fighters were authorized to pursue attackers aggressively, hunt the enemy, engage before they reached the bombers. Offensive escort instead of defensive. The 354th Fighter Group proved the P-51B could fight and win at any odds, against any enemy, anywhere over Germany. Within 3 months, 14 of the 15 8th Air Force fighter groups converted from P-47s to P-51s. The Mustang became the dominant American fighter in Europe. By December 1944, P-51s were escorting bombers to Berlin and back. 700-mile radius. The Luftwaffe had nowhere to hide. No safe airspace. American fighters could reach anywhere in Germany. Bomber losses dropped dramatically, from 9% per mission in October 1943 to less than 2% by spring 1944. The strategic bombing campaign that nearly failed in late 1943 succeeded in 1944. Because of fighters like the P-51, because of pilots like Dalton Merritt. But there was a pride fin. The 3rd Fighter Group, the Pioneer Mustangs, continued operations until May 8, 1945. VE Day, victory in Europe. Final tally, 701 aerial victories, more than any other American fighter group in the European theater. 42 pilots became aces, 5 or more confirmed kills. But the price was steep. 128 P-51s lost in combat, 60 pilots killed or missing, 54 captured as prisoners of war. Young men who climbed into silver fighters and never came home. Merritt flew 26 more combat missions after Oschersleben, shot down 6 more German aircraft, total kills 17. But he was never alone again. Fighter Command changed escort procedures after his mission. No more solo operations, no more individual heroics. Flights stayed together. Mutual support. Wingman discipline. Merritt agreed with the policy completely. What he'd done on January 11th was necessary, not repeatable, not sustainable, not something to glorify or encourage. One pilot fighting 30 enemies was desperation, not tactics. He told this to every young pilot who asked about the mission. Don't try to be a hero. Stay with your wingman. Follow doctrine. Bring everyone home. The mission made him famous. He hated it, wanted to be just another pilot, just another fighter in the formation. But he understood why the Air Force needed the story, needed the symbol, needed proof that American pilots could match the Luftwaffe's best. So he did the interviews, posed for the photographs, spoke at Bonn rallies when ordered, and counted the days until his tour was complete. November 19, 1944, 10 months after Oschersleben. Merritt stood on the deck of a transport ship crossing the Atlantic, heading west, heading home. His combat tour was complete, 113 missions total, 87 in China, 26 more in Europe. He was done. The war in Europe would continue for another 6 months. But Merritt wouldn't be part of it. New pilots were arriving, young men eager to prove themselves. They'd finished the job. The Medal of Honor hung in his footlocker below deck. He rarely wore it, didn't need the reminder. The mission was burned into his memory, would be there forever. 30 minutes of combat that defined everything that came after. The ship docked in New York on November 23rd. Merritt cleared customs, caught a train west, Kansas, home. Eleanor met him at the station. 31 years old, still beautiful, still the woman he'd fallen in love with before the war turned the world upside down. Their daughters stood beside her. 9 and 7 now. They'd been 6 and 4 when he left. Grown so much. Eleanor saw him. Ran. He dropped his bag, caught her, held her tight. You came home, she whispered. I promised. You also promised not to be a hero. I broke that one. She pulled back, looked at him, saw the changes, the weight loss, the lines around his eyes, the haunted look that combat pilots carried. You're different, she said. 3 years in the war will do that. Are you okay? He thought about it. Honest answer. Getting there will be better now that I'm home. His daughters approached shyly. They barely remembered him. 3 years was a lifetime to children that age. He knelt down, eye level. "Hi, I'm your dad. Remember me?" The younger one shook her head. The older one nodded hesitantly. "That's okay," Merritt said. "We'll get to know each other again. I've got time now. All the time in the world." They drove home. Kansas farmland, wheat fields, wide open sky, no flak, no fighters, no war, just peace. And that night after the girls were asleep, Eleanor asked him about the medal. "They say you saved 600 men. Is that true?" 60 bombers, 600 crew. "Yes." "Were you scared?" "Terrified, every second." "Why did you stay?" Merritt was quiet for a long moment, then told her about Burma, the convoy, 73 men, the choice he'd made wrong, the guilt he'd carried. "January 11th, I had another choice, same situation, stay or leave, duty or survival. And you chose duty." "I chose to be the pilot I should have been all along." Eleanor took his hand. "I'm glad you came home. I'm glad you made it, but I'm also glad you made the choice you did. Those 600 men have families too. Wives, children, parents. They all got to see their sons and husbands and fathers again because of you." "One of them named his son after me," Merritt said. "Sergeant Aldridge, his boy, named him Dalton." Eleanor smiled. "That's beautiful." "It is," Merritt said. "Makes it worth it, all of it." He stayed in Kansas through the winter, tried to readjust to civilian life, failed, couldn't sit still, couldn't settle. The war was still happening, men were still fighting. He felt guilty being home while others were still over there. In February 1945, the Navy offered him a position. Test pilot, jets, new technology, cutting edge. He accepted, not because he wanted to keep flying combat, because he wanted to help develop the aircraft that would keep future pilots alive. Better planes, better weapons, better tactics. So fewer pilots would face the choice he'd faced. Alone, outnumbered, desperate. He spent the next 21 years in the Navy. Test pilot, instructor, tactical development. Helped design fighter tactics for the Korean War. Mentored a generation of jet pilots. Retired as brigadier general in 1966, 55 years old. Moved back to Kansas. Eleanor, the farmhouse, grandchildren now. Quiet life, peaceful life. But he never forgot January 11th, 1965, 21 years after the mission. Merritt received a letter. Postmarked Virginia. Return address Clayton Aldridge. He opened it, read slowly. "Dear General Merritt, you probably don't remember me. I was the ball turret gunner on Hell's Angels. B-17 number 42-31367. January 11th, 1944. Oschersleben mission. I watched you fight that day. Counted every engagement. 12 attacks. 30 minutes. You saved my life. Saved all our lives. My son Dalton is 20 years old now. College student. Smart kid. Good kid. He asked me to write you. He wants to meet the man he was named after. We're driving to Kansas next month. Would it be okay if we stop by? I'd like to say thank you in person. After 21 years, I still think about that day. Still can't believe one pilot did what you did." Respectfully, Clayton Aldridge Merritt wrote back immediately, gave his address, said they'd be welcome. February 14th, 1965, Valentine's Day. A car pulled up to the farmhouse. Merritt walked out to meet them. Clayton Aldridge stepped out. 42 years old now, gray hair, thicker around the middle, but the same eyes. A young man exited the passenger side. 20 years old, tall, strong, college jacket. Dalton Aldridge, named after a pilot he'd never met, who'd saved his father before he was born. Clayton extended his hand. Merritt shook it. "General Merritt, it's an honor." "Just Merritt now. I'm retired, and the honor is mine. You made it home, had a family. That's what mattered." Clayton introduced his son. "This is Dalton." Young Dalton shook Merritt's hand, firm grip, confident. "Sir, my dad's told me the story 100 times. I wanted to meet you. Thank you for what you did." "Your dad did the hard part," Merritt said. "He climbed into that ball turret 23 times, flew over Germany in a plexiglass bubble with nothing but courage. That takes a special kind of bravery." They went inside. Eleanor made coffee. The four of them sat in the living room. Clayton told stories. The missions, the fear, the waiting, the relief when fighters showed up. "January 11th was different," Clayton said. "We saw the P-47s turn back. Thought we were alone. Then one Mustang came back. Just one. We didn't understand why at first. I couldn't leave, Merritt said simply. I know. I realized that while watching you. You had chances to break off, multiple times, but you kept coming back, kept fighting, even after your guns went silent. You could tell I was out of ammunition. We could tell, no muzzle flash, but you kept attacking anyway. We couldn't figure it out. Then we realized you were buying us time. Every second you kept them occupied was another second closer to relief. Merritt nodded. 3 minutes. That's all I needed. 3 more minutes until the P-47s arrived. So I fought for 3 minutes. You fought for 30 minutes total. But those last 3 were the most important. Young Dalton spoke up. Sir, did you ever regret it, staying when you could have left? Merritt considered the question. No, never. That decision gave me peace with something I'd done wrong before. Gave 600 men their lives back. How could I regret that? Even though you almost died. Especially because I almost died. Easy choices don't mean anything. Hard choices define who you are. They talked for 3 hours. About the war, about what came after. About how both of them had built lives from the wreckage of those years. Before leaving, Clayton handed Merritt a photograph. Black and white, faded. A B-17 in flight. Hell's Angels. Bomb bay doors open. Somewhere over Germany. I carried this through the war, Clayton said. Through 23 missions. I want you to have it. As a reminder, 60 bombers came home that day. This was one of them. Because of you. Merritt took the photograph, studied it. A bomber in flight, crew inside. Young men doing an impossible job in an impossible war. Thank you, he said quietly. After they left, Merritt pinned the photograph to the wall in his study, next to his Medal of Honor, next to the 87 tally marks he'd kept from his tent in England. Reminders, not of glory, not of heroism, of choice, of duty, of the moment he'd become the pilot he'd always wanted to be. May 8, 1945. V-Day, victory in Europe. The 354th Fighter Group flew its last combat mission that morning. A sweep over Germany, no enemy contact. The Luftwaffe had stopped fighting. Final tally for the Pioneer Mustangs. 701 aerial victories. 42 aces. 128 P-51s lost. 60 pilots killed. 54 prisoners of war. The group was credited with proving the P-51 Mustang's viability as a long-range escort fighter, proving that American fighters could go anywhere, fight anywhere, win anywhere. January 11, 1944 was the turning point, the mission that showed what was possible. By war's end, the P-51 Mustang had become the dominant Allied fighter in Europe. 14 of 15 8th Air Force groups flew Mustangs. They escorted bombers to Berlin, Dresden, Munich, every major target in Germany. Bomber losses dropped to sustainable levels. The strategic bombing campaign succeeded. Germany's industrial capacity was destroyed. The war shortened by months, maybe years. Historians would debate the numbers, the impact, the cost versus benefit. But the pilots knew. The bomber crews knew. The Mustang changed the war, made deep penetration bombing possible, gave the bombers a fighting chance. And it started with one mission. One pilot, one choice. March 18, 1995. Dalton J. Merritt died at his home in Kansas, 84 years old, surrounded by family. Eleanor beside him, 2 daughters, 5 grandchildren, 3 great-grandchildren. The night before Eleanor had sat with him. He'd been weak, dying but lucid. Tell me about January 11th, she'd whispered. You've heard it 100 times. Tell me again. So he did. One last time. The whole story. Burma, the guilt, the convoy burning, 73 dead, then Oschersleben. The choice, the fight, the 30 minutes that erased 2 years of shame. I made the right choice that day, he said quietly. Finally made the right choice. You made many right choices, Eleanor said. You came home. You were a good husband, a good father. You trained pilots so they wouldn't face what you faced. Those were right choices too. But January 11th was the one that mattered. No, Eleanor said firmly. Coming home mattered. Being here mattered. The 51 years we had together mattered. Merritt smiled, squeezed her hand. 600 men, he said. All those families, Aldridge's son, his grandson, all alive because of 30 minutes. You're at peace with it. I am. Good, then rest. He closed his eyes. Eleanor stayed beside him until morning. When the sun rose on March 18, 1995, Dalton J. Merritt was gone. At peace, finally. Completely. The funeral was held at Arlington National Cemetery, full military honors, honor guard, 21 gun salute. Taps. The 354th Fighter Group Association sent representatives. Old men now. The few remaining pilots who'd flown with him. The 401st Bomb Group Association sent 40 representatives, sons and grandsons of the men who'd been on the Oschersleben mission. The men Merritt had saved. Clayton Aldridge attended, 72 years old. His son Dalton beside him. His grandson also named Dalton, age 7. 3 generations, all alive because one pilot chose duty over survival 51 years earlier. At the graveside, a colonel read the citation, the Medal of Honor, the words that had been read in England 51 years before, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty. When the ceremony ended, people lined up to pay respects, shake hands with Eleanor, offer condolences. Young Dalton Aldridge, age 7, stood before the casket, his father and grandfather beside him. "Grandpa," the boy said quietly, "tell me the story again." Clayton Aldridge knelt down, looked his grandson in the eye. January 11, 1944, 30 German fighters attacked 60 American bombers. One pilot stayed to fight when everyone else left. He fought for 30 minutes. Alone. Saved 600 lives. One of those lives was mine, which means you're here because he chose to stay. Was he scared? Probably, but he stayed anyway. That's what makes someone brave. Not that they're not scared, but that they stay even when they are. The boy looked at the casket. "I wish I could have met him." "He'd have liked that," Clayton said. "He was a good man, humble, didn't think what he did was special, just said he was doing his job. But it was special. Yes, it was." They placed a wreath at the grave, white flowers, a card, from the 401st Bomb Group Association, in memory of the pilot who saved us all. Eleanor watched from a chair nearby, 83 years old, married to Dalton for 51 years, widow now. She thought about the young pilot who'd come home in 1944, haunted, changed, carrying weight from choices made and lives saved. He'd never fully let it go. The mission, the responsibility, the knowledge that 600 men lived because of him. But he'd found peace with it, eventually, turned it into purpose, spent his life making sure other pilots didn't face the same impossible odds. Better planes, better tactics, better training. So the next generation wouldn't need heroes, wouldn't need desperate last stands, wouldn't need one pilot fighting 30 enemies alone. That was his real legacy. Not the medal, not the kills, not the fame, the thousands of pilots who came after, who trained better, flew better, survived better, because Dalton Merritt had shown what was possible, and then spent his life making sure it wasn't necessary. Today, a restored P-51B Mustang sits in the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio. Aircraft number 43 is 6315, Dakota, the airplane that Major Dalton J. Merritt flew on January 11, 1944. Restored to flying condition. Silver paint, invasion stripes, the name Dakota painted on the nose, and preserved deliberately carefully 37 bullet holes, one through the left horizontal stabilizer, one through the right aileron, 3 20mm cannon strikes in the left wing, 32 smaller caliber hits across the fuselage. Each hole represents a moment when death missed by inches, when metal took the hit instead of flesh, when luck or providence or simple mathematics kept a pilot alive. A placard beside the aircraft reads P-51B Mustang Dakota 354th Fighter Group Pioneer Mustangs, flown by Major Dalton J. Merritt, January 11, 1944, Oschersleben, Germany. Major Merritt defended 60 B-17 bombers against 30-plus German fighters for 30 minutes while separated from his flight. He shot down 11 enemy aircraft, continued fighting after exhausting his ammunition, and saved 600 American airmen. This action earned him the Medal of Honor, the only fighter pilot in the European theater to receive the decoration during World War II. 37 bullet holes preserved as evidence of the mission. Visitors walk past every day. Read the placard. Look at the airplane. Try to imagine what it was like. 24,000 feet, minus 42 degrees, alone against 30 enemies, fuel running low, ammunition expending, guns jamming one by one, and the choice, the fundamental choice that defined everything. Stay or leave, duty or survival. Most people can't imagine it, can't conceive of the calculus, the courage, the desperation. But some understand. Veterans walk past and stop, read carefully, study the bullet holes, touch the aluminum skin reverently. They understand. They've faced their own versions of the choice. Different circumstances, different stakes. Same fundamental question. What matters more, your life or your duty? Most times, both can coexist. You can survive and fulfill your duty, but sometimes you cannot. Sometimes you have to choose. January 11th, 1944. Major Dalton J. Merritt chose duty. He got lucky, surveyed, came home, but he'd made the choice before knowing the outcome. That's what made it real. A young boy stands before Dakota, maybe 10 years old, school field trip. He reads the placard, counts the bullet holes, asks his teacher, could one person really do that? The teacher, a veteran herself, looks at the airplane, thinks about the question. One person did, she says, not theory, history, not what could happen, what did happen. January 11th, 1944 answered a fundamental question about human will, about duty, about the choice to stand when standing seems impossible. One pilot, 30 enemies, 30 minutes. Impossible odds, no reasonable expectation of survival. Every tactical manual said run. He stayed, fought, won, proved something fundamental about courage, about choosing right over easy, about staying when every instinct screams leave. The 354th Fighter Group, the Pioneer. Mustangs proved the P-51 could fight and win anywhere over Europe. Major Dalton J. Merritt proved a pilot could face impossible odds and prevail through skill, courage, and refusal to quit. Both lessons changed the war. The strategic bombing campaign succeeded. Germany's industrial capacity was destroyed. The war shortened. Lives saved. All because one pilot on one mission made one choice. Stay. The afternoon sun streams through the museum windows, catches Dakota's silver paint. The airplane seems to glow. Somewhere in Kansas there's a headstone, Arlington National Cemetery. Brigadier General Dalton J. Merritt, Medal of Honor recipient, 1911-1995. Somewhere in Pennsylvania, an 80-year-old man named Dalton Aldridge tells his great-grandchildren about the day his father watched a lone fighter save 600 lives. Somewhere in archives, gun camera footage shows 11 German fighters going down. 30 minutes of combat, one pilot doing the impossible. And here in a museum in Ohio, a silver P-51 with 37 bullet holes stands as evidence. Evidence that choosing duty over survival can change everything, can save 600 lives, can prove a fighter works, can win a battle that rewrites doctrine, can turn the tide of a war, all from 30 minutes of choosing right when wrong seems safer. That's the legacy, not just of Dalton Merritt, but of every person who faces the impossible and chooses to stand. The museum closes. Lights dim. Dakota sits silent in the darkness, waiting for tomorrow, when more visitors will come, more questions will be asked. Could one person really do that? And the answer, forever true, one person did.